I never imagined that accepting a marriage proposal in front of 200 people would lead to the worst betrayal of my life. But standing there in that ballroom, champagne glass in hand, engagement ring glittering on my finger, I had no idea what was coming. It was Tech Vista's annual gala. Our company threw this event every December at the Fairmont Hotel downtown, a chance for employees, executives, and clients to celebrate another successful year. I'd been working as a senior graphic designer at Tech Vista for almost 5 years. The company designed software for creative professionals, and I loved my job. The work was challenging, the team was supportive, and I'd built real friendships there. That night, I wore a navy blue dress my mother had helped me pick out. Simple, elegant, appropriate for a work event. My hair was pulled back in a low bun. I'd spent the afternoon getting ready with my roommate, Emma, who worked in accounting. She kept telling me I looked beautiful, that this was going to be a special night. She had no idea how right she was. Daniel Brooks was my boyfriend of 18 months. We'd met through work. He was a marketing manager in a different department, so we didn't interact daily, but we'd been introduced at a team-building event. He was charming, ambitious, always knew the right thing to say, tall, with dark hair, and an easy smile that made everyone warm to him instantly. Our relationship had progressed naturally. Dinners after work, weekend trips to the mountains, meeting each other's families. He'd fit seamlessly into my life. My best friend at work was Jessica Martinez. We'd started at Tech Vista around the same time, 4 years ago, though she was in project management. She was one of those people who lit up every room she entered. Confident, stylish, always put together. We'd bonded over late nights finishing projects, venting about difficult clients, celebrating promotions. She'd been there when my father passed away 2 years ago, sitting with me in the hospital, holding my hand through the funeral. I trusted her completely. The gala was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers, round tables with white linens, a live band playing jazz standards. I was talking with some colleagues from the design team when Daniel appeared at my elbow. He had this strange, nervous energy about him. He asked if I could come with him for a moment. Something in his voice made me curious. He led me to the center of the ballroom. The band stopped playing. People turned to look. My heart started racing. Daniel got down on one knee. The room went completely silent. He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a diamond ring, simple and beautiful. He said he'd never met anyone like me, that I was brilliant, creative, kind, that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. Would I marry him? I heard myself say yes before I even processed what was happening. The room erupted in applause. Daniel slipped the ring on my finger and kissed me. People were cheering, whistling, coming over to congratulate us. Jessica was one of the first, throwing her arms around me, squealing about how she knew this was going to happen, how perfect we were together. The CEO gave a toast. More champagne appeared. It felt like a dream. The party continued for another 2 hours. I barely remembered any of it. My phone kept buzzing with texts from friends and family who'd seen photos online. Daniel never left my side, his arm around my waist, introducing me as his fiancé. The word felt strange and wonderful. Around 10:30, I excused myself to use the restroom. I was heading down the hallway when someone called my name softly. I turned. It was Kyle Chen, a 23-year-old intern from the marketing department. He'd started 3 months ago, fresh out of college, eager and hardworking. I'd helped him a few times with design questions for his projects. Kyle looked nervous. He glanced around to make sure no one else was nearby, then stepped closer. He said he needed to give me something, but I couldn't tell anyone where I got it, especially not Daniel. My stomach dropped. I asked what he meant. He pulled a flash drive from his jacket pocket. His hand was shaking. He said there was a video file on it, security footage from the office. From last Tuesday night. He said he was so sorry, but I needed to see it. I deserved to know the truth before I married Daniel. I stood there in that hotel hallway, party music drifting from the ballroom, looking at this kid who could barely meet my eyes. I asked him what was on the footage. He shook his head. He said he couldn't explain. I had to watch it myself. He'd found it by accident while helping the IT department with something. He'd debated for days whether to show me, but after watching Daniel propose tonight, he couldn't stay silent. I took the flash drive. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Kyle said again that he was sorry, then quickly walked back toward the party. I stood alone in the hallway, staring at the small black device in my hand. I didn't go back to the ballroom right away. I found a quiet corner near the coat check and sat down on a bench. My hands were shaking. Part of me wanted to throw the flash drive away, pretend this conversation never happened. Go back to Daniel, celebrate our engagement, live in that happy bubble. But I couldn't. The way Kyle had looked at me, the fear and sympathy in his eyes, I knew whatever was on that drive would change everything. I finally returned to the party. Daniel asked if I was okay. I said I was just overwhelmed, emotional. He kissed my forehead and said he understood. Jessica came over with more champagne. The three of us took a selfie together, Daniel and me with Jessica between us, all smiling. She posted it immediately with a caption about love and friendship. I still have that photo. I look at it sometimes, trying to remember what it felt like to be that naive. The party wound down around midnight. Daniel wanted to go back to his place to celebrate privately, but I told him I was exhausted. I needed to go home, process everything. He looked disappointed but said he understood. He drove me back to my apartment, walked me to my door, kissed me goodnight, said he'd call me in the morning. I watched him drive away, then went inside. Emma was already asleep. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat at my desk. I pulled out my laptop, inserted the flash drive, and stared at the file icon. One click, and everything would change. My cursor hovered over it. I took a deep breath and clicked. The video opened. Black and white, timestamp in the corner. Tuesday, December 10th, 11:47 p.m. The view was from a corner of the fourth-floor conference room, the big one we used for client presentations. At first, the room was empty. Just chairs pushed in around the long table, whiteboards on the walls. Then the door opened. 2 people walked in. I leaned closer to the screen. My heart was already pounding before my brain fully registered what I was seeing. Daniel and Jessica. They weren't talking. Daniel grabbed Jessica by the waist and pulled her against him. She wrapped her arms around his neck. They kissed. Not a friendly kiss, not an accident. Long, deep, the way people kiss when they've done it many times before. His hands moved down her back. She pressed herself against him. They only broke apart when they needed air. I sat frozen, staring at the screen. This had to be a mistake, some kind of technical glitch. But there was no mistaking those faces, those bodies, my fiancé and my best friend. They started talking. No audio, but I could see their mouths moving. Jessica laughed at something Daniel said, throwing her head back. He grinned and kissed her neck. They looked comfortable together, natural, like a couple who'd been together for years. Then Jessica pulled out her phone and showed Daniel something on the screen. He leaned in to look, nodding. She swiped through several images or documents. Daniel's expression turned serious. He said something, gesturing. Jessica nodded, then typed something on her phone and turned the screen to show him again. They both smiled. The video continued for 12 minutes. They talked, kissed more, made plans. At one point, Daniel lifted Jessica onto the conference table. She wrapped her legs around his waist. They stayed like that for several minutes before she slid down. They straightened their clothes, checked the hallway, and left separately. I watched the entire thing twice, then a third time. By the fourth viewing, I wasn't crying anymore. The initial shock had worn off. What replaced it was something colder, clarity. I needed to understand what they were planning. The phone conversation looked important. They weren't just having an affair. They were coordinating something. I grabbed my own phone and pulled up Jessica's Instagram. I scrolled back through her recent posts. Lots of photos from work events, weekend trips, her new apartment. Then I saw it. A photo from 3 weeks ago, caption about finally moving into my dream place. The photo showed her in a modern apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors. I knew that view. It was in the Skyline Towers, one of the most expensive buildings downtown. Jessica had always complained about money, about her student loans, about living paycheck to paycheck. How was she affording that apartment? I opened my work laptop and logged into the company's shared drive. I knew I probably shouldn't, but something told me to look. I navigated to the project management folder Jessica had access to. I started opening files, looking for anything unusual. It took 20 minutes, but I found it. A subfolder labeled Archive 2024 that had been modified last week. Inside were drafts of design proposals, my design proposals, ones I'd been working on for our biggest client, Renaissance Corp. But these drafts had Jessica's name on them, not mine. I opened another file, an email thread I'd never seen, between Jessica and our creative director, Mark Sullivan. Jessica was taking credit for design concepts I'd developed. She was positioning herself as the lead designer on projects I'd been managing. In the emails, she subtly suggested I'd been struggling lately and she'd been picking up the slack. My hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just an affair. Jessica was sabotaging my career. I dug deeper. In another subfolder, I found a document titled Org Restructure Proposal. It was dated 2 weeks ago. I opened it. The document outlined a proposed reorganization of the creative department. In this new structure, there would be 2 senior designer positions eliminated and 1 creative lead position created. The document suggested Jessica Martinez for the creative lead role, citing her recent success on major projects. My name appeared in a note at the bottom. Sarah Chen transitioned to contractor status or voluntary departure Q1-2025. They were planning to push me out of the company. I sat back in my chair, trying to process. Jessica had been systematically stealing my work, taking credit for my ideas, and setting me up to be eliminated. And Daniel? Where did he fit in? I returned to my personal laptop and opened the video again. I paused at the moment when Jessica was showing Daniel her phone. I zoomed in as much as I could without losing too much resolution. I could barely make out text on the screen. It looked like an email or document. I couldn't read most of it, but I caught a few words. Sarah, condo, married. My condo. The 2-bedroom place I owned in the Pearl District. I'd bought it 3 years ago, right before the market exploded. It was now worth almost double what I'd paid. Daniel knew how much I loved that place. We'd talked about him moving in after the wedding. He'd said it would be our home together. The pieces started fitting together. Daniel proposes. We get married. He moves into my condo. Jessica gets me pushed out of the company. Without my job, I'd struggle with the mortgage. Daniel would suggest selling. We'd split the proceeds. Then what? Daniel and Jessica run off together with my money and my career in shambles? I felt sick. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. When I came back, I sat on my bed and stared at the ceiling. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately. Storm over to Daniel's apartment, scream, throw things. But that would be stupid. If they knew I'd found out, they'd have time to cover their tracks, come up with explanations, maybe even turn it around on me. No. I needed to be smart about this. I needed evidence. I needed a plan. I texted Kyle. Thank you. I watched it. Can we meet tomorrow? I need your help. He responded within minutes. Anything. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed, going over everything, every conversation, every moment from the past 18 months. How many times had Daniel and Jessica been alone together? How many late nights at work or client dinners had been lies? How many times had Jessica smiled to my face while plotting to destroy my career? I thought about the time Jessica had asked to borrow my design files to reference my process, or when Daniel had suggested I add his name to my condo's title, just to simplify things for the future. How naive I'd been. Emma knocked on my door around 7 a.m. She'd seen the engagement photos online and wanted to hear all about it. I put on a smile and told her the story, leaving out the part about the flash drive. She hugged me, squealing about wedding planning. I hugged her back, feeling like I was playing a role in a movie. Daniel called at 8. He wanted to take me to brunch, celebrate properly. I said I'd love to, but had a work thing. He sounded disappointed but said we'd do dinner instead. I agreed. As soon as I hung up, I texted Kyle again. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop across town, far from anyone we knew. Kyle was already there when I arrived, sitting in a back corner booth. He looked like he hadn't slept either. I sat down across from him and said I needed to know everything, how he'd found the footage, what else he knew. He explained that he'd been helping the IT department organize the security archive. The system had been glitching. saving files to the wrong folders. He'd been sorting through footage, making sure everything was properly labeled and stored. He'd opened the conference room file by accident. When he saw what was on it, he didn't know what to do. He'd gone to IT, asking casually if they kept security footage for long. They said yes, months of it, but rarely anyone looked at it unless there was an incident. Kyle had started checking other footage from recent weeks. He found 4 more videos of Daniel and Jessica together in various locations around the office. Always late at night, always when they thought no one would see. I asked if he'd made copies. He nodded and pulled out another flash drive. All the videos, plus timestamps and documentation. He said he knew it was probably illegal, accessing those files, but he couldn't stand by and watch me marry someone who was cheating, especially not with someone who was also stealing my work. He'd noticed that too, how Jessica had been taking credit for things he knew I'd designed. I looked at this 23-year-old intern who'd risked his job to help me, and I felt gratitude wash over me. I thanked him. He said I didn't need to thank him. It was the right thing to do. I asked if he'd help me with something else. I needed to gather more evidence. Email trails, documents, anything that showed what Jessica and Daniel were really planning. Kyle said he'd do whatever he could. We spent the next 2 weeks working together secretly. Kyle accessed archived emails through the IT system. I carefully documented every instance of Jessica claiming credit for my work, every conversation where she'd undermined me. I went back through my calendar, matching dates when Daniel had worked late with footage of him and Jessica together. The picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. Their affair had started 10 months ago, shortly after Jessica had been passed over for a promotion. She'd blamed me, even though I had nothing to do with the decision. She'd decided then to take what she felt she deserved, starting with my position, my reputation, and apparently, my fiancé. Daniel's motivation was simpler. He was drowning in debt, student loans, credit cards, a failed investment in a friend's startup. He'd seen my paid-off condo as a way out. Jessica had likely suggested targeting me. 2 birds, 1 stone. I played my part perfectly during those 2 weeks. I had dinner with Daniel, talked about wedding plans. I met Jessica for coffee, showed her venue ideas I'd supposedly been looking at. I wore the engagement ring. I posted happy photos online. Inside, I was building my case. The quarterly review meeting was scheduled for Thursday, December 28th. All department heads, senior staff, and the CEO would be there. These meetings were mandatory. Everyone had to present their Q4 accomplishments and Q1 goals. I'd presented at these meetings before. They were usually boring, lots of spreadsheets and projections. I volunteered to do a special presentation on building trust and collaboration in creative teams. Mark Sullivan, our creative director, thought it was a great idea. He said team dynamics had been a focus area lately. Jessica smiled when she heard, saying she looked forward to it. I smiled back. I spent hours preparing that presentation. The first half was legitimate, actual strategies for building team trust, supported by research and examples. It was good content. People would be engaged. Then, at the halfway point, I'd pivot. The last slides would be the evidence, the videos, the stolen work, the emails, everything. Kyle helped me set it up. We tested the projection system, made sure the videos would play smoothly. I saved backup copies on 3 different drives. If anyone tried to stop me, I'd be ready. The night before the meeting, Daniel took me to an expensive restaurant. He held my hand across the table, talked about honeymoon destinations. He said he'd been thinking about the condo. Maybe we should consider putting it in both our names before the wedding. You know, to simplify the legal stuff. I smiled and said I'd think about it. He smiled back, satisfied. I excused myself to use the restroom and barely held it together. Looking at myself in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize the person staring back, but I'd made it this far. One more day. Thursday morning arrived. I dressed carefully. Black blazer, white blouse, tailored pants, professional, composed. I looked like someone about to give an important presentation, which I was, just not the presentation anyone expected. The conference room was packed. 25 people, all seated around the large table or in chairs along the walls. CEO Robert Patterson at the head of the table. Department heads on either side. Jessica was there, sitting 3 seats down from me. Daniel was in the back, observing since marketing was connected to creative. He gave me an encouraging smile. Mark introduced me. Sarah Chen, senior graphic designer, presenting on team collaboration. I stood, connected my laptop to the projector, and began. The first 20 minutes went smoothly. I talked about trust, communication, accountability. I showed case studies of successful team projects. People were nodding, taking notes. Jessica looked bored but attentive. Daniel was checking his phone. Then I reached slide 15. I paused and said I wanted to shift gears, talk about what happens when trust breaks down, when collaboration is built on lies. The room got quieter. People sat up straighter. Mark looked confused but interested. I clicked to the next slide. It was a screenshot of the video timestamp. Conference room, December 10th, 11:47 p.m. I said that recently I'd been given access to some security footage that revealed serious ethical violations within our company. I wanted to share it with everyone because these issues affected all of us. Jessica went pale. She sat frozen in her chair. Daniel stood up in the back, saying maybe this wasn't appropriate for this meeting. Robert told him to sit down. He wanted to hear this. I played the first video. The room watched in complete silence as Daniel and Jessica appeared on screen, kissing, clearly intimate. The timestamp was visible. The location was unmistakable. When it ended, I clicked to the next slide. Another video, different date. Same conference room. Daniel and Jessica again. Robert asked quietly what this had to do with team collaboration. I said everything, because these two people hadn't just been having an affair. They'd been actively working to sabotage my career and defraud the company. I pulled up the next set of slides, screenshots of the design proposals with Jessica's name on work I'd created, emails where she took credit for my concepts, the org restructure document suggesting my elimination. Jessica found her voice. She said this was insane, that I was obviously having some kind of breakdown. She couldn't believe I'd ambush her like this. I pulled up one more document. Emails between Jessica and Daniel from his personal account that Kyle had helped me access through a company device Daniel had borrowed. In them, they explicitly discussed their plan. Daniel would marry me, get access to the condo. Jessica would push me out of my job. They'd sell the property, split the profit, and finally be together properly. The room erupted. Robert demanded order. He asked Jessica and Daniel if they had anything to say. Daniel tried to speak, but nothing came out. Jessica stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked toward the door. Robert said if she left, she was fired. She stopped, hand on the doorknob. She turned back, looked at me with pure hatred, and said I'd never been good enough for this position anyway. I'd always been mediocre, coasting on luck. She deserved my job, my success, and yes, she and Daniel had been together. They loved each other. I was just in the way. Daniel finally spoke up. He said Jessica was lying, exaggerating. Yes, they'd been involved, but there was no plan, no conspiracy. He loved me. This was all a misunderstanding. I looked at him and said the security footage and email trail weren't misunderstandings. Neither was his suggestion 2 nights ago to put my condo in both our names. Robert stood up. He said this meeting was over. Daniel needed to leave the building immediately. He wasn't an employee, so there was no formal firing, but he was banned from the premises. As for Jessica, she was terminated effective immediately. HR would be in touch about the formal process and potential legal action. Security escorted both of them out. Jessica was crying. Daniel was arguing, trying to explain. The door closed behind them. The room was silent. Then Robert turned to me. He said he was sorry this had happened, that the company had failed to catch this. He asked what I needed. I said I needed to know my work would be properly credited, that the org restructure document would be disregarded, that whoever had been helping Jessica steal my designs would be investigated. Robert nodded. Mark added that he'd been completely fooled by Jessica. He'd had no idea she was claiming credit for work that wasn't hers. He'd be launching a full review of all recent projects. The meeting adjourned. People came up to me afterward. Some apologized. Some said they'd had suspicions about Jessica but hadn't known how to voice them. Kyle found me in the hallway afterward. He asked if I was okay. I hugged him. I said I couldn't have done this without him. He blushed and said he just did what anyone should do. I disagreed. What he did took real courage. Over the next week, several things happened. The company investigated Jessica's project claims and found evidence she'd been taking credit for other people's work too, not just mine. They'd been so focused on her charisma and confidence, they hadn't verified her actual contributions. Daniel called me 37 times. I blocked his number after the 10th call. He sent emails. I filtered those to trash. His mother called me, crying, saying she didn't raise her son to be like this. I told her I appreciated the call but needed space. Jessica posted on social media about toxic work environments and being scapegoated. Several former colleagues commented with their own stories of her taking credit for their work. Her post backfired spectacularly. I gave the engagement ring back to Daniel's mother. I didn't want it. She tried to refuse, but I insisted. It felt wrong to keep it. The condo remained entirely mine. I'd never added his name. Thank God for that instinct. 3 months later, Tech Vista promoted me to creative lead. The position Jessica had wanted. Mark said there was no question I deserved it. My work spoke for itself once they actually looked at who'd created what. Kyle finished his internship and was offered a full-time position as a junior designer. He accepted. We started working together on projects. He was talented, hardworking, and refreshingly honest. 6 months after that incident, Kyle and I went to dinner after finishing a particularly difficult project. Not a work dinner, just the two of us. We talked about everything except work. He told me about growing up in San Francisco, his family's restaurant, his love of photography. I told him about my father, about learning to trust again, about rebuilding. At the end of the night, walking to our cars, he said he'd had feelings for me since his first week as an intern. He'd never said anything because I was with Daniel, and it would have been inappropriate. But now, if I was ready, he'd like to take me on a real date. I looked at him. 24 years old now, still earnest, still kind, the person who'd risked everything to tell me the truth when no one else would. I said yes. That was 8 months ago. Kyle and I have been together since. We take things slowly, no rushing, no pressure. He's never asked about moving in, never suggested anything with the condo. He respects my space, my boundaries, my need to rebuild trust at my own pace. I ran into Jessica once, at a coffee shop downtown. She saw me and tried to leave quickly. I called her name. She stopped. She looked different, thinner, tired. She said she'd been unable to find work in the industry. Word had gotten around about what happened. She was working retail now, trying to figure out her next move. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt sad. I told her I hoped she learned something from all this, that stealing and lying never works out in the end. She looked at me and said she'd been jealous of me for years. My talent, my stability, the respect people had for me. She thought taking what I had would fill the empty feeling inside her. It didn't. I said maybe therapy would help with that. I wasn't being sarcastic. I meant it. We went our separate ways. I never saw her again. Daniel, I heard through mutual connections, moved back to his hometown. His debt caught up with him. He filed for bankruptcy. Someone said he was working at his uncle's car dealership. Life moved on. Tech Vista thrived. My team produced our best work yet. Kyle and I celebrated our 1-year anniversary last month. We went back to the Fairmont Hotel, same ballroom where everything fell apart and somehow came together. Standing there, I thought about that night, the proposal, the flash drive, Kyle's worried face in the hallway. If he hadn't had the courage to tell me the truth, I'd probably be married to Daniel now, living in my own condo with a man who was planning to rob me, working for a woman who'd stolen my career. I learned that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a beautiful lie. That real love doesn't need schemes or plans. It just shows up honestly, even when it's scary. Kyle held my hand in that ballroom and asked what I was thinking about. I smiled and told him I was thinking about how grateful I was for honest people, for second chances, for flash drives that change everything. He laughed and pulled me onto the dance floor. The band was playing something slow and sweet. We danced, and for the first time in over a year, I felt completely at peace. The nightmare was over. Real life could finally begin.